Coffee muffins if you want.
So feel free.
Super interesting. Can you use the touch up my appearance so I drop like although that mug is gonna be real gross.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending today on our three sessions we have for accessibility. It's wonderful that the team from YATS is able to join us today from the state government and they're able to provide this training to us. We really appreciate it. I wanted to introduce everybody. We have Ashley Bloom on my far left. She is the Chief IT Accessibility Officer, specializing in oversight of accessibility policies, processes, standards, and strategies. She has been involved in digital accessibility for over 20 years. She is an assistive technology user and has knowledge and experience in all areas of digital accessibility. As the Chief IT Accessibility Officer for the Commonwealth of Mass, Ashley is charged with oversight of digital accessibility across the executive branch, secretariats, agencies, and guiding external agencies, cities, and towns on their digital accessibility path. Just a small job.
That's right.
I have Adam on my right, Jonovich.
Yep.
He is an accessibility training coordinator, specializing in accessibility training, multimedia accessibility, design review, and content reviews. He is an accessibility specialist who has developed content and facilitated training for over 15 years. His background includes delivering training, developing accessibility documents, videos, motion graphics, and web pages. His passion is the intersection of education and technology, and he believes that this is the key to an accessibility world. And then finally, but not least, Mindy Johnson. She's the Documents and Communications Accessibility Coordinator, specializing in document accessibility, email accessibility, social media accessibility, and content reviews. Mindy has supported the creation and publication of accessibility documents and communications for over 2 decades. She is a former special education teacher and education-focused communications professional. She was responsible for the accessibility of web content, documents, social media posts, newsletters, multimedia, and more, while maintaining engaging communications at rapid pace. So I want to thank everybody for coming in here today. And our first session out of 3 is digital accessibility leadership awareness. So keep things going. I'll let them take over and
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it. Steal this microphone. Good morning. We lose the mic.
Good morning.
Check. That's interesting. Both of them lost. All right, this one's on. We'll get started on this one while we work on that. Thank you for that introduction. Once again, my name is Adam. Today we're going to talk about getting started with some awareness piece. This is targeted at leadership, but it's a general awareness about what you're going to need to do to make content accessible and different processes. We're going to talk a little bit about some legal risk, some different legal precedents, as well as kind of the motivation behind doing this and why we're doing it now. Is the clicker not going to work with Zoom?
Here, right now.
Make sure it's on, the clicker's on.
Well, all right. There we go. Improvise, adapt, overcome. All right. Hello? Hey, there we go. Thank you. So first today, we're going to talk about what digital accessibility is, some different types of disabilities that we consider for digital accessibility, what assistive technology is. We'll talk about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, Title II of the ADA in brief, some risk, expectations for content and time, and some different resources for you and your teams. So some objectives. By the end of this session, participants will be able to describe what digital accessibility means, explain the importance of digital accessibility in education, identify legal, ethical, and reputational responsibilities, identify leadership roles in implementing accessible systems, content, and learning environments, and plan actionable next steps for advancing accessibility institution-wide. So first, what is digital accessibility? Well, digital accessibility is about making sure that our digital world is as accessible for folks as we work on in the physical world. So in physical spaces, we have wheelchair ramps, we have accessible bathroom stalls, we have braille on signs. The digital world, it is not like that unless we make it that way. And so we want to make sure that any of our websites or applications work with assistive technology. But most importantly, it's about the human element and empathy. There are a large amount of constituents in Massachusetts that rely on assistive technology, and we want to make sure that they're able to access things independently without needing somebody else to do that for them because we've made an inaccessible tool. In higher education, this would include things like your learning management system, making sure students can access their content digitally with assistive technology. Any institutional websites or portals that you have for student or parental access. Course materials that you are using that are digital. Any multimedia, videos, or interactive things that are online. Publications and digital archives. So anything that we might, now we'll talk about some archives and the exceptions around those too, because that is a big animal, but anything that is released out to the public. If there's HR and student service systems, so anything that would be access to information benefits, even internally, that if you have employees with a disability that use assistive technology, that they can still get to their benefits and other things like that. And any email and communications. So why does accessibility matter? Well, it supports student success and equity. It enhances teaching and learning quality. If you've worked on or heard of the concept of universal design for learning, this is something that betters all of our teaching materials and makes it so that we can get people to understand content better. Accessibility expands institutional reputation and reach. This is something that is not widespread across all sorts of institutions. And so people search for accessible colleges so that they can attend them if that's something that they need. This meets federal compliance as well as state compliance, and it avoids potentially costly legal action. I had an interesting comment from Stephanie earlier where she mentioned that another school she had spoken to had gotten a little bit farther so far on this. And she asked, why have you gotten so much farther? And they said, well, we got sued already. So that is definitely a certain nudge in the direction of knowing what to do. Just a moment. Clicker starts working when you interact with Zoom, so I'll wait for just a moment. Snack break, everybody. All right. So let's talk about the four main types of disability that we have to consider when we're making accessible content. So first, vision impairments, whether this is low vision, glaucoma, cataracts, blindness, color blindness. This all affects the way different visual impairments affect the way that people interact with the computer. Hearing loss, tinnitus or ringing of the ears or deafness, mobility issues like arthritis, injury, stroke, paralysis, CP and MS, and cognitive disabilities like brain injury, an intellectual or developmental disability, autism spectrum disorder or ADHD, memory loss, or things that affect the ability to speak. So a quick question by show of hands in the room. According to the CDC, what percentage of Massachusetts residents have a disability? Do you think it's 13%? 13%, raise your hand. 26%? Or 31%? 26%ers have it, so it is about 1 in 4 people in the state have a disability. Now keep in mind, this is a CDC medical study, which means it is 18 plus. It means it is only people who have been diagnosed, and you can have undiagnosed disabilities, and it is only people who disclose that information. So at the very least, we have 1 in 4 people in the state. Now, these disabilities fall into some different categories. Now, one of the most common ones we might think of is something that's permanent, something that was hereditary, came from an injury or disease, or is a part of identity like the deaf community. We have temporary disabilities like a broken limb, surgery recovery, cataracts. Maybe you just went to the eye doctor, had your eyes dilated, and now you can't read for the next few hours. So these are something that's pretty common. And then we have situational disabilities, which we never really think about. And these are related to our environment. So maybe you're on a loud trip on the T and you turn on closed captions on a video so that you can watch it. Or you have sun glare on your phone, so you turn on a dark mode or a high contrast mode. Or maybe you're wearing gloves or a mask like during COVID, and now you can't use your Face ID or your Touch ID. So all this to say, at any point in our lives, we are going to experience some kind of disability. And that as we age, the likelihood of us experiencing additional disabilities increases. So this is not something that just targets a small niche population. This is something that will help all of us. So now, how do we interact with the computer when we have one of these disabilities? So we have what's called assistive technology, or sometimes just called AT. So on the screen, we've got a number of photographs. Up the top left corner, we've got a computer keyboard, and you might not think about a computer keyboard as a piece of assistive technology, but if you can't use a mouse or you can't see the screen, then it becomes your primary way to interact with the computer. Next, we've got a young man of color listening on headphones to a phone. He is using a screen reader, and that screen reader is announcing the content that is on the screen, whether that's text or images with descriptions or buttons. At the top right, we've got Windows high contrast mode settings. This is a setting that you can find on your computer to reduce the colors on the screen down to 5. And that makes it so that it is mathematically the highest contrast between each color. Very helpful for people with low vision. Below that, we've got zoom settings on a Mac, where you can zoom in on part of the screen or the entirety of the screen. On the far right side, we've got an interesting device called a sip and puff. This is something useful for folks without use of their limbs, where they can use a series of inhales and exhales to interact with the computer. The bottom left, we've got a refreshable Braille display. So you've probably seen Braille on signs or printed. This is a series of pins that raise and lower based on what text is selected on the screen, so that someone can interact instead of by listening with Braille. And this is one of the only tools out there in combination with a keyboard or switch device that someone who has an intersection of blindness and deafness can use to interact with the computer. At the bottom center, we've got a man in a wheelchair with glasses. He has a head switch next to his cheek, and he is using a microphone for speech controls. So you can control the computer via speech using certain software. You can also interact with buttons or potentially use as a joystick on your cheek with certain switch devices. And then at the bottom right, we've got a representation of eye tracking software. You can use a webcam to follow your eyes around the screen, raise your eyebrows, or blink to click or interact with objects. That's something that's built into Macs. If you have a Mac and you want to try it out, you can go to your settings and turn that on, and it's kind of wild. So we got a few things up here on the screen that are assistive technology. There's a ton more out there. So how can we possibly make sure that we're making things work for all of this? So enter the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. Now, this has been around for about 20 years at this point. It is a checklist of success criteria to go through and tell you what you need to do to make sure your content will work with these tools. There are 3 levels of compliance: level A at the bottom, AA, and AAA. Right now, WCAG 2.1 AA is the standard based on federal Title II, as well as state policies. AA is kind of the middle ground, where it becomes a little more doable than some of the things in AAA. AAA are nice to haves. We love having them if you can make them happen, but AA is kind of where the letter of the law is. Now, right now, you'll see there's 2 different numbers on the screen. WCAG is in 2.2. When this ruling came out, it was still in 2.1. There are only a few additional guidelines, and those are focused mainly on web development. So if you have teams building custom web pages, it would be good to look at that additional criteria because it will help future-proof things. But as of what's in the law right now, the 2.1 standards are what we need to go. Now, as a show of hands, again, another quick poll. What percentage of the web do you think is fully accessible? Is it 4%? Is it 18%? Or is it 40%? The 4%ers have it. So there was a review of the top 1 million websites performed by a company called WebAIM, and they found that 96% of them had accessibility issues. So this includes major tech companies. So you may go out and see a major tech company that did something that looks really cool and want to beg, borrow, and steal from that. The challenge is sometimes when we mimic those things, we bring the accessibility issues with them because accessibility was not considered when they built that content. So be aware if you're somebody who's doing something on the web, that just because a big tech company did it does not mean that it was actually accessible. Now let's talk about Title II. So what is Title II? Title II is a part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this states in brief that public entities must ensure that web content and mobile apps that entity makes available directly through contract or licensing or other arrangements are accessible based on WCAG A and AA standards. If you are a public entity that serves a population of 50,000 or more, then we must adhere to this by April 24th, 2026. Entities with a lower population have until 2027. So if you were a K through 12 school and you served a town with a population of 20,000, you have an extra year. For those of us who serve the population of the state, we have until April of 26. Now, this is a really big lift. And this slide, I don't think we need here for this. So I want to talk just for a moment about what I said with Title II. It's kind of scary, right? It's a really short turnaround to do this stuff. As accessibility professionals, we are all very happy that this ruling exists. None of us would have made it with this timeline. So we feel your pain on how scary this can be to hear this kind of information. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we can do to show good faith and work towards this, because it is unlikely that any of us are going to reach this goal at 100% by that date. There's just too much stuff. Right? We've been spending years and years making content and communications and things like that. For us to suddenly drop everything and make all of that accessible is a gargantuan task. And so we're going to have to approach this with some strategy. Now, there are additional legal policies to note that, so Stephanie had mentioned, and I talked about at the beginning of this, that another college had been sued over this and that hasn't even reached the compliant date yet, right? So the Title II of the ADA requires equal access to programs, services that are digital. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act was something that prohibited discrimination in federally funded education programs. Section 508 requires accessible technology, procurement, and design. And these have been on the books for many years. Now, there's been a lot of questions about legal outcomes and exceptions. It's difficult to answer those right now, even talking to our legal counsel. because there's no legal precedent yet because the deadline hasn't happened. And so because there's been no lawsuit about Title II yet, it is difficult to define some of those things. Now, we will talk a little bit about risk. And one of the things that concerns us is not only the fact that there may be legitimate complaints that come in from this, but also the presence of bad actors. So Wachusett Hotels versus Deborah Laufer is a lawsuit that happened about 3 years ago, I believe, at this point. And so Laufer, a self-proclaimed accessibility tester, filed many lawsuits, hundreds, alleging accessibility violations on all sorts of different websites. Lower courts initially dismissed it, but the First Circuit Court of Appeals reversed it, saying that she had standing because even though she had not suffered injury, that someone else could have based on that. Now the lawsuit is moot because her attorney was investigated for fraud, but the precedent still stands in the First Circuit Court of Appeals that someone who does not have a disability can sue because something is inaccessible. So this is an interesting legal predicament to be in where, you might not have a student or a parent that is having a difficulty for something, but you might have somebody just checking your website and they could have legal standing. So it is important to note that there is definitely people out there who are trying to do this. Now, I'm going to provide this deck as a resource to everyone, but we've got some links here. Texas A&M has a great resource on different resolution agreements and lawsuits that have happened. And University of Minnesota Duluth has a comprehensive list of all accessibility lawsuits against education or in higher education. So it's interesting to be able to see those precedents. So this is an important resource that I'd highly recommend checking out. And as I said, we'll make sure everybody gets a copy of this PowerPoint afterward with those links in it. Now, one of the things that we really need to start doing, because as I said, this is a finish line that we probably will not all cross at the same time, is inventory and archiving. So first, let's talk about inventory. One of the things that we want to be able to show is good faith and the progress that we have made. So it's important for us to be aware of any digital content that we have. And I know that's a lot. And so this is something that is a all hands on deck team effort to be able to identify things, because we want to know about what web pages, whether that's external facing or intranet content, external or internal documents, learning materials, document templates that we're sharing out, social media accounts, any enterprise software and applications that we're using, and then department specific tools that may vary throughout the school. Now, we want to do this so that we can put them into a maturity model of what we know is accessible, what is in progress, and what is on a backlog. And this way we're able to show that we are working on things as opposed to throwing up our hands and saying we were unaware of this and we have no idea what the state of this is. And this, according to our legal team, will help to go a long way to help mitigate risk by being able to show good faith and that we are working on these things. One of the things we really don't want to do, and I believe it was a school in Colorado that got sued for when they were told to make things accessible, that they just took a whole bunch of stuff down and removed it so that they wouldn't have inaccessible content on their site. That did not satisfy that complaint in any way and actually made it worse for them. So that is not something that we want to do. We want to have a strategy for rolling out updates to these things. Now, the other thing we can do is archiving. So one of the few exceptions to Title II is for an archive. So if you've been around for decades, 100 years, whatever your institution is, that you probably have thousands and thousands of documents and other content that is archived. You are not required to go back and make a scan of a document from 1985 accessible. Digital documents moving forward from now, we do need to make accessible. And within an archive, if you have content that gets requested by someone and they need an accessible version, then we must create the accessible version at that point, but you don't need to go through your whole archive and do this. Now, this is very specific. And again, we can't offer legal advice because there is not precedent yet. But the wording of the ADA is this, that if the content was created before the state or local government must comply with this rule, so before April of 26, or reproduces paper documents or the contents of old physical media, audio tapes, film negatives, CD-ROMs that were created before this, and the content is kept only for reference, research, or record keeping, and the content is kept in a special area for archived content, meaning if you've got a page of information that is constantly updated, and then you've just got a headline there that says this is the archives, that is not going to qualify for this. It needs to be in an actual archive. And the content has not changed since it was archived. If you have to edit old documents and create a new version of it, that new version of it must be accessible. Now, again, this is important that we follow these bullet points because even on the ATA website, it has an example of a water quality report from 1998 that a state has stored in an archive section of its website that it is not updated would probably fall under this exception. I find it very frustrating that the use of the word probably here is on the ADA website about this. Again, as there is no legal precedent, we can't put a stamp of approval on things for you and say, yes, you did this right. We are interpreting this ruling as much as you are. So it's important to note, though, that archiving can be a great way if you've got content from a few years ago, rather than updating it, archive that. Making a new version of something that is accessible is often way easier, faster, and cheaper than going back and fixing old stuff that was not accessible. So we encourage folks to focus on your net new content moving forward from now to really make sure that that is accessible, and then look to update old content if it needs to be touched at some point. So I'm going to take a break for a moment before we talk about expectations for specific content and see what questions, concerns folks have from the audience. More people on Zoom if they want to raise their hand as well.
So this is clearly a nightmare. Is there anything on the horizon where anyone has come up with an application that can be laid on top of your website that automatically makes everything accessible through a secondary party rather than you going back and changing everything?
That's a fantastic question. So the question, in case folks didn't hear it over Zoom, is there a tool that we can just overlay on something to fix things? Unfortunately, the answer is yes and no. The yes is they exist, but they make it worse. So there are a number of accessibility overlays available out there to lay on top of your website. The problem is they actually add no features. All of the features on those accessibility overlays that promise this, all of those features are available in the operating system if people go into settings. And they provide no additional assistance. And in fact, for someone using something like a screen reader that's navigating by listening, it can make it even more confusing. And currently, the top two companies who provide those are engaged in class action lawsuits with the government for selling snake oil. So yes, they exist. No, they don't work. Now, also, there are things like in Microsoft Office where it tries to use AI to identify what's in an image and provide alt text. 90% of the time it is wrong. The other 10% of the time it is unhelpful. Could you use AI to do this? Totally. Is there an AI out there that's built to do this yet? Not yet. The problem is the old computer model idea of garbage in, garbage out. They are searching the web. The ChatGPT is searching the web for an answer for you. The web is 4% accessible. So it's only got a 4% area that it can go to know what to do correctly. And so if you do something like an image generation model, like Adobe Firefly, if you ask it to make a picture of a person who is blind, it will show you with somebody with a blindfold. It will show you someone with sunglasses and holding a pool cue, not a white cane, but a pool cue. So the models that AI is trained on right now did not have a diverse background of people in disabilities or people using assistive technology to be able to fix this. There are companies working on this. We're very excited about that. I would love it if I didn't have to test a website and tell people how to fix it anymore, and there was an application to do it. I would be all on board. Right now, we just don't have that option.
Just to let everybody know, we're in the middle of redoing our entire website and with accessibility in mind. So by April, we will have a fully accessible website.
So we got a question in Zoom, would you mind?
Sure. What about visual media? Like radiographs and census data, I think they said?
So visual media that would be basically a data visualization. I will say that that's kind of expert mode because a visualization right off the bat is visually biased, right? And it's supposed to be. That's its job, is to show us a visual of data. So typically, when we have something like data visualization, we want to do two primary things. And we have a training just on data visualization. I'll make sure everybody's got links to all of our training content and our live sessions that you can all come join. But generally with data visualization, we want to give a description of the general takeaway or trend or thing that the visualization is going to highlight. And then we want to also provide a table of the data that was used to make that visualization. That way people can get a gist of what we're seeing and also understand the data and have access to that. There are different ways to approach it depending on what kind of data you've got. There's maps, become very complicated. How do you use a map if you can't see the screen, right? And with a screen reader, we don't have cardinal directions moving north, south, east, west. I have forward and backward. So there's a lot of complexity when we get into data visualization, but specific examples, sometimes it helps to see them. We also have office hours for schools where you can sign up for a time, come join us, ask questions, bring your visualization, bring the course content, bring the page in the LMS that you're working on or your content management system, and we will talk you through what you can do to improve that. Any other questions in Zoom? Okay. Yeah.
You mentioned learning management systems. Is there a better learning management system to help with ADA compliance than others? I mean, I know you can't endorse one or the other.
Right.
I'm just curious.
That's a tough question to answer because of all of the modifications that you can make and all of the options that are there. So for example, I have experience with Moodle and Canvas. Both of them have the ability to be very accessible. There are considerations for interactions that we have to think about when we're building those things. Also, Rise from Articulate has a lot of great accessibility built into it, but there's also little features and modules that you can't use. So for example, let's say I have an interaction in a course that requires drag and drop, and now a student who cannot use a mouse can't do that. So it doesn't mean that the LMS was inaccessible. It meant that that one interaction that I put in there was. And also working with something like Moodle that is open source, where you can get a lot of different vendors who build you custom versions of that and add things on. Moodle itself is pretty accessible. The vendors that have added modifications for you and sold you a version like that, you don't know, you'd have to check with that vendor. So mileage will vary on all of them. So it's kind of good to start to understand what kind of interactions you want to be looking for to make sure it's accessible. Anything else before we move on a bit? All right. So let's talk about some different expectations for content, some things to think about, and what we can do to try to make this easier for ourselves as we're going through. So first off, Office documents. If you're building anything in Microsoft Office, there is an accessibility checker built into Office, into Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. It works the best in PowerPoint. It is the most accurate and catches the most problems. Next is Word. Word, it'll catch about 30% of the issues that are in a Word document. But if you open a Word document and you see that there's a bunch of flags in the accessibility checker, it's getting all of the low-hanging fruit, and there's probably a lot going on with this document. Excel has some very limited accessibility features, and most of the time things are required to be in tables rather than just in general spreadsheets. There's a lot to know in detail for this. We offer trainings on Microsoft Word. We have an upcoming one on PowerPoint. dig into the details of something like this. But at the very least, that accessibility checker pops up at the bottom of your screen. It says check accessibility. You can select that within a document, and it'll show you any basic things to fix about your document. PDFs. We use PDFs all the time. You've probably got tens of thousands of them, if not just thousands of them, right? So PDFs, if they are created from an accessible Word document, will probably be pretty accessible with minimal intervention if they're created the right way. We have a course specifically on going from Word to PDF that we're going to talk about this afternoon. Complex documents, if you've got forms, if you've got infographics, if you've got complex tables, they are probably going to be need to be remediated in Acrobat, or alternatively, consider converting them into a web page. So if you've got a PDF document that you hand out to students, and instead you take all of that content and copy and paste it into a page in your LMS, you immediately made it more accessible. Then you can use the features in your LMS text editor, like setting up headings. And now that content is going to be way more accessible than in that PDF. So why is this? PDF is a deprecated format. It's been around for over 30 years. Accessibility has had Band-Aids placed on it for the last 30 years. The web has evolved with assistive technology. So if just that step of copying and pasting your content into a page on the LMS instead of attaching a PDF makes a huge, huge difference. Similarly, if you've got a content management system that you often have a page with just a little bit of text and a document on it, if you copy and paste that document into there, that is going to make it more accessible. Now, if you've got huge documents and reports, books, things of that size that are existing in PDF and you're trying to make them accessible, that is one that we would recommend reaching out to a vendor to do for you. So as an expert in accessibility and my colleague who is our documents expert, if I handed her a 100-page PDF that had all sorts of problems, it would take her the next 6 months to fix that. Now, vendors have built scripts and automated systems to be able to do this, that you can give them something, they'll work on it with a human, and then they will repeat it for other sections with the computer. If you have giant amounts of documents, it is highly recommended to reach out to a vendor and not try to do this yourself. It's another day job. And we don't want people to have a whole new day job to make this stuff happen. Images, we talked a little bit about alt text. Images are worth 1,000 words, right? But only if we describe them. So if you've got images throughout your content management system or your courses, you're going to want to make sure that those have an alt text description. Alt text is available everywhere. So if you are in an Office document, Outlook, in a content management system or learning management system, you can almost always right-click an image and choose Add Alt Text. Then you put it in a description. It's a short description, 1 to 2 sentences. What's going on in the image? When that starts to get weird is when we have big image flyers and images of text. So we want to try to avoid images with a ton of text on them like we've got on the screen here, because we can't fit that much text into alt text. So in a case like this would be something that would need to be an accessible PDF or be made as a web page, or we could include this and then make sure that we had the text on the page as well. In our fundamentals course that we're going to do after this one, we're going to dive deeper into alt text and practices for that. Communications, emails, newsletters, social media posts. These are things that also need to be accessible. Now, if you're doing large email blasts out through something like a MailChimp or a Constant Contact, there are accessible templates that you can choose in there. Or if you've got someone in-house that knows a little bit of HTML, they can build an accessible template for you to use there. Social media posts, you do not need to go back and fix any past social media posts. From April of 26 onward, our social media posts do need to be accessible. Now, mileage is going to vary based on the platform you're using, because there are different features on X than there is on Instagram than there is on Blue Sky. So you want to do the best for that content. And we have a whole course on social media posting for accessibility if you have folks here that handle your social media. Now, somebody asked about, visualizations earlier, video. We use video all the time. Video is interesting because it engages us visually, auditorily, and cognitively, because we have to be able to process the content at the speed that we're getting it. So the two biggest things about video, we want to have closed captions on video, but we also want to have a transcript. Transcript is all of the spoken text, all of the other on-screen text that might happen in the video that's not talked about. Maybe a description if there's a demonstration of watch this person do this, and then there's silence for a minute. We're going to need to find a way to describe that silence. And that may need to happen in an audio description or in a transcript. You got people who build videos for you. We have a whole course on videos as well, and reference guides for that too. If you got web designers or your admins for your learning management system or content management system, a couple things to note for them. There are several free testing tools out there that, again, will get about 30% of the issues for you and help you catch that. There are also plugins for things like content management systems. We use Drupal at the state. We have a plugin called Editorially. It checks the pages for accessibility as authors are working on them, and it gives them a little check mark or a number to let them know what issues are there. It highlights the issues and tells you how to fix it. It's a pretty great little plugin. So I would highly recommend talking to your admins for your LMS or CMS and see if there's a feature available for that, depending on what you're using. And then last is procurement, and this has been an interesting one because we're probably involved with contracts with vendors that we've been involved with for years. Products that vendors supply us as public entities have to be compliant as well. And we've got procurement guidance on mass.gov. Your procurement guidance may be different as an institution than what we're doing at the state, especially for contract language, things like that. But we have checklists of what to talk to vendors about. With sort of red flags on if they can't answer these questions, then they're probably not being honest about their accessibility. And also explanations of what are called accessibility conformance reports. So if you're working with a vendor to procure things or you have an existing contract with a vendor, then we've got guidance on what to do there. So this sounds like a lot of work, right? And it is. It is an enormous amount of work. We are currently a team of 7 at the state, and we are struggling to support just the state. And we are also supporting 351 towns and 316 school districts. So it's a lot of work. Now, part of the problem is where we are at versus where we can be. So if you make something accessible from intent at the beginning, it's about 20% extra work until you get used to it. Because it takes time to think like, all right, I have to remember to do this. There's a little bit of scale of learning it. At this point in my career of doing this, I don't take any extra time to build a document that's accessible because I know the steps and I'm already doing it. We only have to follow the guidelines and execute. Now, if we wait to apply accessibility, we have about 200% extra work to fix the stuff that is already inaccessible. Because now we've got to go through and find that content. We've got to audit that content. We've got to put it through automated or manual testing. We may have to redesign it. Maybe it's a completely inaccessible design. Then we got to make it again, and then we got to retest it. So anything that we can do to stop the bleeding and make current content that we're working on and future content accessible is going to start to tick away at that bigger number. So what can we do as leaders? Well, one of the most important things as a leader in general is helping to create buy-in in the people that work with you. Being an executive sponsor and showing the importance of this, because when it comes from the top down, you will get people to buy in and do it. We're discussing earlier with Stephanie, it has been difficult to do this because it's such a big lift, right? And people don't want to scare people and talk about all this stuff that they're going to have to do. So we want to make sure that we're breaking this down into chunks so that we can all bite off as much as we can chew instead of more of it. So as a leader, being that executive sponsor, talking to your people, telling them about the importance of this is a huge, huge help. You want to include accessibility in a strategic plan and incorporate accessibility goals and milestones. Obviously, we said this is such a huge lift. We're going to have to break it down into little steps that we can take, as opposed to trying to jump to the end because it's not going to happen. We want to integrate accessibility training into onboarding. So if you have new staff or new faculty, you want to make sure that they're aware that this is a thing right from the back and how to do that. We want to include accessibility metrics in reviews or program assessments. This way people are thinking about this consistently as opposed to a thing that comes up every once in a while. And we want to try to make it a core requirement as opposed to a retrofit. It's a little tough now, right? We're all in retrofit because we've all got years and years of content. But if we slow the creation of inaccessible content, we'll make our future a lot easier. Across campus, if you have the ability to do policy or governance to update your institutional policy on accessibility, that you include accessibility in your conversations with vendors during procurement or in contract language. That you train your faculty to create accessible materials. Universal design for learning, as I said before, is an amazing concept that helps out all students and makes your content more digestible for your students. If you're a member of IT, trying to ensure that your digital platforms are meeting this. We're looking for solutions or plugins to help making sure your digital platforms are meeting these standards. And then making sure that you're got a review, a second person review on public facing content before publish to make sure that it is accessible. And it's a good idea to keep this monitored, check on this regularly, at least annually auditing or looking at updates and progress reporting so that you know where you're at and that you're not falling behind on things. Some different strategies. Helping to build a culture of accessibility. Culture is one of the most important things in the workplace, right? It is what drives us to work with each other, how we connect with people, and why we stay at jobs. So if we include accessibility in our culture, then that is something that will make this feel more natural than something that we suddenly have to do. Looking for a way to establish an accessibility council, a group, champions in different areas, ways that you can make sure that you've got people to talk to about this that are spending time staying up to date on it. Being a staff member or a faculty member, it is already a full-time job. Again, do not, for faculty, sometimes even more than a full-time job, right? So we don't want people to feel like that they are alone in this and that they have to do it all by themselves. So looking for a way to have a group that people can refer to check in with. We will be providing as much assistance as we can along the way, but having internal folks who are working towards this as accessibility champions will be a huge help. We can't do it at the state on our own. We work with people in other divisions to try to get them to be up to date on this content so that we can have more resources there. Something simple as celebrating Global Accessibility Awareness Day. That happens every year in May. It focuses on digital accessibility, and it is just a great awareness piece. It's got different things on it where it challenges folks to do things like, hey, how long can you go today without using a mouse? And things that sort of engage people who may not have a disability or have any experience with assistive technology to try to do it and to challenge each other to do it. And then recognize excellence in inclusive digital teaching and design. So something that has always frustrated me as an accessibility professional, and I can tell this by some of your faces, is the amount of fear, right? And the fact that it always seems like accessibility is the stick rather than the carrot. So if you've got a staff member or a faculty member that has been doing a lot of work to make this happen, recognize them, have them share what they're doing, have that reuse templates that that person has done so that you can start to have people find other ways to make this easy for each other and make this a positive thing when people make things more accessible as opposed to the negative, hey, we got to do this or we're going to get sued. Those people from the state came here and they told us it was going to be bad, right? We don't want that. And it's a weird spot to be in. So looking for the ways to make this positive about what it's going to do for your students and other constituents, about how it's going to make your content more accessible for everyone. That's important. Now, to try to support this, we have put together self-paced guides on all sorts of different types of content. We have instructor-led trainings that we hold 4 times a week. We rotate through different hours in hopes that more folks will be able to join us. We have our office hours that we host every other week for schools. That's K through 12 and higher ed. You can sign up for a time to come in and ask a question. You can just drop in and find out what other people are asking. I would highly encourage people to use this. We rolled these out for the state about 8 months ago, and we are consistently pretty full at all of our sessions. We rolled them out for municipalities and education at the end of July. We've only had about 5 people from municipalities join us, and we've had 0 people from education. So we are, if you have colleagues at other schools that don't know about this stuff, I highly encourage you to share it with them. We are here to help, but we need more people to be aware of it and know about it. We have a list of automated testing tools for your IT department to be able to check your websites. We've got testing checklists for if you're building documents or doing website testing, and we've got our procurement guidance. Like I said, I'll make sure that we send out all of this as links for folks. I think Mindy probably has placed some of them in the Zoom chat already, but we'll be following up, sending out this deck as well. Our live training so far, some of the topics that we've got are fundamentals, which we're going into next. Our leadership awareness training like today. We've got trainings on Word documents, PDFs, PDF forms, data visualizations, social media, HTML forms, a demonstration of screen readers. So if you've never seen a screen reader in action, we do a demo where we show off 3 different screen readers and what it's like to interact with the computer using that. And then we've got a course on video editing as well if you build video content. You need a free basic Zoom account to sign up for this stuff. There's a link on all of the event pages to do. So that was an enormous amount of content. I just threw everything in the world at you. What questions or thoughts or concerns do folks have? Yes.
I actually work in the print shop, so I feel like you're giving me lots more work, but anyway. A question, so I do monthly chargebacks in Excel that is sent to a specific person every month, and then it goes to our business office. Is that something that would need this kind of?
Who's the specific person?
My admin.
So the question, I guess an underlying question here is kind of the idea of external facing versus internal facing, right? So technically, anyone who works with us is also a constituent, right? So, and particularly for things like I talked about earlier, I have worked at places with colleagues that were blind, and they needed me to go in and get at their benefits for them. That is a complete invasion of privacy, but they had an inaccessible system. We don't want to have internal systems that are inaccessible. However, right now, the business priority is public facing stuff. If you have an admin and you know that that admin is not using assistive technology, and you have a process that you've had for a long time, you don't need to worry about stopping that process, right? Okay. That is not the concern. Now, if you would want to be prepared for the idea of if that admin left, you've got a new admin and they use assistive technology, how are you going to work with them in the future? That is a thing to consider, but not a thing to scramble to try to fix right now. Okay. But if you are working with, you know, and you said like the print shop. So printing, there's only so much we can do to make printing accessible. There are things like color contrast recommendations, font size recommendations, things like that. But in general, anything that you're doing that's going to go to the public. So for example, if we have a print and digital situation, like let's say I make a PDF flyer, if I am sending that out to a print company to print, then making it accessible is not a problem, right? But if I were going to put that up on the Wachusett Mountain, site, then it would have to be accessible in that digital format.
Okay, so when it comes to me, I don't have to check for accessibility before I print.
No, if you get something, it's not your job to make it accessible.
Okay.
It is when you make something and give it to somebody else. So for example, like a student, who is making a presentation and sending it in to the teacher, the student is not required by law to make that accessible, right? Now, if you have a teacher with visual impairments and they can't get to any of the content in the presentation, that might be a challenge. But the law is for constituents. Yep.
And what if that presentation was put on the website because they won an award?
Ah. Then yes.
Yeah.
Yep. That is, you know, it is tough because there's some weird lines here. Like, so from a municipality standpoint, municipalities might receive information from landlords about property information, and then they have to publicly display that information. But that was not created by them. It was not created for them. It was something created by that private entity. And so when it is built by a private entity and it is an area of a site that is, hey, this is where private entities upload things, that is generally not something that we have to worry about now. But if you had taken that content and you put it center page on your site of, hey, this is something that we want you to know about, then that is something that needs to be accessible. What else? What are you doing outside? Who wants to scream?
No.
Hey, it's a lot. And we know it's a lot. Yes.
I was just thinking, as from the faculty standpoint, I was much more concerned than I am now. Because some of the stuff that you said, we're kind of already doing.
Good.
Because there are students who are already needing some of this stuff. So it's not as a big a lift, I think, for faculty. It's just a matter of putting in the time.
Absolutely.
And once again, I have not talked to every faculty about this, but like, those are things we're already using, where I already have my students turning in stuff with PDF. Like, I'm already doing some of this stuff. It's just sitting the cats down and getting them to realize what they have to do.
For sure. There's, in education, there's a lot of things that have precedent. You might have had a, personalized or individualized education plan that you've worked with somebody before. And so you've had experience of, well, I worked with a student with a disability, and so I know that I had to do this. And if you've done that, then you're probably already part of the way there, at least halfway there, depending on the student that you've worked with. And when we make things, so we talked about those different types of disabilities. Digital accessibility tries to consider all of them at once, so it's not just a focus on one thing. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines does have a bias towards screen reader accessibility. And that is because if you can make it work for a screen reader, then you probably made it work for everyone else. That's one of the toughest. It's not like the only one to think about. It's just that interaction can be one of the more complicated things. So it becomes a judge of, did I do the things for accessibility? If it works with a screen reader, you're probably 90% of the way there. Yeah.
What about second or third party vendors that deliver educational material? Are they going to be responsible to meet the same standards?
Yes. If you are engaging them as a vendor, yes. Where this becomes a little bit weird, and we are trying to get some guidance on this, is let's say the state offered a grant to someone to do something, and it is a private entity, and then the private entity returns that information to the state. They're a private entity. They're not responsible for making it accessible, and we are not sure exactly of where the line is there on whose responsibility it would be. But generally, if you're a private entity and you did something through a grant or on your own, then it is not required to be accessible. We have like medical information that gets sent into the state from different doctors and scientists, and we can't require them as private entities to make it accessible. But when we republish that data in another format, then we do need to make that accessible. Now, vendors, we want to make sure that we do hold them accountable to deliver accessible content. Some of your vendors might not know how to do that. I have seen some really cool educational content that is very difficult in the basis of its design to be accessible. And sometimes it would be very odd to try to make it accessible. For example, I went to music school and I had lessons on recognizing pitches. And if the entirety of the lesson is to recognize a certain sound, how can you reproduce that for someone who cannot hear it? So you can describe things, but there will be, depending on different types of lessons, on how do you address that from an accessibility standpoint. One of my very good friends is an English teacher, and he was asking me, what if I have a lesson on visual decoding reading comprehension? How do I do that for somebody who can't see it? And that's a really good question. And that to me is something that falls into more of the individualized education plan, because if it is that student is unable to visually decode, then maybe it is about parsing that auditorially. But you're not going to be able to make a visually decoding word lesson accessible for someone who can't see the words. So there's definitely going to be some edge cases and question marks. And we want to approach those with the best intent and see what we can do and work with that student to make that work for them. What else? Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is a silly question, but what happens if you know your student population and you don't need all of the accessibility formats, such as like the image, the all text or something like that?
So we want to, so students and constituents in general are not required by law to report disabilities. So we don't want to assume that our whole population does not need this at some point. And also for students in the future that you may have. I had worked at a school previously, and I will not name names, but we did have a faculty member ask us if we could move a student with a disability into another class because they didn't know how to work with that. That is very much not allowed. And it is entirely possible that at some point in the future, you will have a student that will need that. Or that your course materials could be reused for another class where a student did. So it's important that we do make sure that we've got things like alt text on all of that content, because a student or another constituent could need that at some point, and we want to not worry about going back and doing anything else again in the future. Yes.
Is it helpful to have website accessibility statements on all the institutions' websites? I work in the library, and so the Fenway Library Organization had put together this toolkit for accessibility. And I know that they have guidance on creating a website accessibility statement, and basically anyone that's using the website, you probably know this already because you're the expert, but they can report issues there too. Is that kind of like, yeah.
Ashley, do you want to speak to this a little bit?
Yeah, so at the state, we've created what we call a unified digital accessibility statement for the executive department. Because it was easier to manage and update that statement as things change and evolve. And so, you can create accessibility statements for your separate departments. Just be very careful, because you want to minimize your risk exposure. And, I've seen accessibility statements that say, we're striving to ensure that our content is 100% accessible, right? You want to avoid statements like that, because that lawyers will just look at that and jump all over you with questions and potentially send you a demand letter and say, is this true, right? So just as you're designing your accessibility statement templates, or you're creating accessibility statements, just be very careful about what you're putting in those statements to minimize your risk and maximize what you're doing to make your content accessible. So be very, very generic. Take a look at what we've done for our accessibility statement. We've made it very generic, very broad. And that way we can say, hey, if anyone has inquiries about what we're doing for design, well, guess what? We have a link on that site for design. We are also creating a feedback form, like you mentioned, for people both in and out of the state ecosystem to submit accessibility feedback. And so as you're doing that, make sure that form is findable right? We don't want a form buried within a system of links that's difficult to find. And also make sure that that form is accessible and that the feedback is rooted to an inbox that can be managed by someone who's going to disseminate any type of feedback to the specific teams that it's relevant to. And so just keep those things in mind. And you know, as we complete our feedback form, you know, if you guys show up to our office hours and have questions about, hey, like we've created this feedback form, you know, we're happy to show you ours as an example. Again, we made it very generic, but we're trying to, you know, get information on the specifics for people's feedback so we can reproduce and resolve as quickly as possible. So just take away the caveats of be careful what you post and make sure that what you post is easily findable and accessible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd also note too, if you get feedback and complaints about accessibility, it is great to prioritize fixing that, right? And address those complaints. Be aware that there are people out there that will try to say, hey, I saw this problem on your website, and if you download this thing, it'll fix it for you. And we have seen that at the state of people saying you should call this person, they know how to fix it, or you should download this software, they know how to fix it. So they're prioritize those complaints, but also be aware that there could be people in there trying to do phishing. So, yes. Yeah.
I just have a question like from an execution standpoint, and I don't know if this is like for Dan or for Steph, but are we as departments just supposed to kind of figure out what we need to do, or will we be able to sit with IT or with marketing to figure out exactly, you know, where we need to start and go from here? I just practically wise, like, how do we do this? I guess that's my biggest question.
I would invite your internal folks to talk about that.
Sorry.
Yeah, so we started a committee in the fall. Includes very people across campus and Dan Susi from faculty. We're trying to, our main focuses are that inventory, that gap analysis, and procurement training, which is, this is the beginning of the training. And I think there's a fourth item, but we're trying to capture everything, because yeah, but the gap analysis, there's just so many pieces to the puzzle, so we're trying to get the full picture, and then we want to start moving forward as it is a campus-wide project. And so hopefully with, I would say starting in mid-winter, the whole campus will know more about it. We'll start like our college forum and other things and get things going. So we are planning.
Generally, something that we want to come from the top as a communication first, so everybody knows that it happens. Have department heads be able to communicate it with their people and kind of work on a trickle down, you know, and any kind of strategy questions you've got, if we can help, please feel free to give us a call. And absolutely.
Just to kind of piggyback on that same question, guaranteed there's going to be faculty and staff who say, I don't have the technological ability to do this. How are we going to?
So we
How are
might,
we gonna fix that?
we might entertain working with a vendor to get through some of the stuff. It's like video captioning is a big one for some faculty. So how do we take those videos, we add video captioning to them and then back in? So there's that's that kind of stuff.
Who's gonna check on everything before it goes out? Like, you know?
Right? I mean, we run into that at the state. All right. So there's lots of people that I've worked with at the state that don't have the technical ability to do some of the things that we're doing. That is something where if you have the ability to work with a vendor to take care of that stuff for you, that's great. For something like closed captions, you know, captioning of videos, if you got somebody, you know, you could have a student employee that sits and uploads those videos to YouTube in unlisted, have it auto-generate captions, check them and make sure that it didn't say anything weird and that they're correct captions, and then download those captions, right? So there are ways to find workarounds for some of these things. But it is definitely a challenge, because it's like, hey, you've been doing this for 30 years this way. Now you got to do it different. Also, you have to learn something totally new in the technology realm, right? That's tough. It's tough for a lot of people.
And guess what? This afternoon, I'm gonna tell you that you've been using Microsoft Word completely wrong.
Yes.
So I think I'm about to get in trouble. So I didn't know we had to wait for anything, like as a faculty, we're planning stuff, so. Cause we have another semester to prepare for, we can't wait till whenever, cause our classes start in January, so. I hope it's okay, am I asking for forgiveness? But like, we're gonna have to start giving this information out, so when people are building our courses for the spring, they can start implementing that, cause April's towards the end of our semester, and if we're supposed to be up to date by then, we can't wait till anything. And it's not gonna be any, like Carla was saying, I don't think we're gonna be to the system of where we need anything bought, but this information needs to probably go out yesterday. And I'm gonna be sitting through this to make sure that, the basic stuff where people can start working on their syllabi over the break, so they can get that up to date if it's step by step. And like, I hope I'm not surprising anyone, but if we need to be up to date by April, we can't wait until the next semester. We'll be late. And like I said, I'm speaking for myself, and I'm on the teaching and learning committee, and the plan is to get this out as soon as we can, so people can start working on it. And Dan's not here, but we've had this conversation also, just generally speaking.
You're not wrong. Early and often communication about this is, going to be the absolute best thing.
Right.
I can't speak for your administration at your school and what the plan is, but I think that awareness of this concept is something that's important for lots of people to know. And I know that not all faculty members are going to have all of their courses updated by April, right? It's just it's not possible. But working towards it, as soon as you can start working towards it, that is a great thing. Yeah.
Is there an expectation for materials that are provided to students in print to also be offered digitally? Because I know there are some faculty who hand out paper packets in class and they don't have them on Blackboard at all for students, or don't use Blackboard at all. Is there something in this that would mandate a digital version of something that's provided in print?
So if you're providing it in print only, and then you have a student with a visual impairment, do they just not get the packet? Like, how does that work for that faculty? Do they just not do that lesson?
Yeah, that is a situation that we're working on.
So I would say that yes, it is time to get that typewritten document onto the computer. So that providing a print, document to someone, you don't need to necessarily, you can't really make print accessible, right? So, and we're talking about the digital realm here, but we do have requirements to access to education, to access to services, to access to those materials that are requirements from Section 508, from the Rehabilitation Act. And so, yes, at this point, because unless you're also offering, let's say, a Braille version of that packet, and you can say, well, I have a Braille version, which costs more money to get done and to update than it does to make a digital version of it. In the past, I used to work at a school, and I argued to try to get our content online. We literally had all of the books from the school were photocopy typewriter, and they had spent $40,000 a book to make Braille copies of it. And I had said, well, do you know that there's actually a lot of young people that are visually impaired that don't read Braille anymore because they're screen readers on the computer or their phone? And so now we have a new generation of kids coming in that are like, oh, hey, learn to read Braille so you can go to college. That's, I would definitely say if you can get a digital copy of that and start working on that, that's the way to do it. And make sure when you're building that it is done accessibly so you don't have to redo it later. But yes, there's definitely accessible ways to do content that's in Word documents, in PDFs, in EPUB format, in web page format. So there's different ways to do this depending on what content it is. But yes, I would definitely work on that. Yeah.
We've got a comment in the chat, from Kim.
Colangelo.
Yes, she said, we have Panopto, which which could caption our videos, and we will be offering training on accessibility within Blackboard to support faculty.
Awesome. That is awesome that you have people who can support Blackboard. It's even if somebody who's worked with an LMS, every school that we're going to talk to is going to be using a different LMS, and it's not possible for us to support all of them, plus whatever version you have. So that's great that you have an internal team doing that. Panopto, just one note about YouTube, Panopto, Vimeo, anything that you can use to do auto captioning, make sure a human watches the video. Because I'm sure we've all seen captions that have been like, are you kidding me? And you know, one of the biggest things is like words like can and can't. And if it says you can do this in the video and what you're saying is can't, then you're giving completely different information to people. So make sure a human checks that caption. Including, I apologize for anybody watching the captions in PowerPoint, and if it said anything stupid, then I didn't see it. Yes.
So what's the website that if we want to do that self-paced or sign up for anything?
So I'm going to send out the link, but we've got what's called our Training Resource Center on mass.gov. I'm going to jump to that now.
I'll have this on the intranet too, and I'll send it out, or Dan can send it out. There's other resources listed over there as well.
We've got a couple of resources. One I'm just going to show if you go to mass.gov and you search for digital accessibility. This one that just says digital accessibility, it's below some of the executive orders, the governance board, the Title II information. And then we just got this digital accessibility page. This has links to our procurement guidance, to our web and accessibility testing, document testing checklists, our training, our office hours. And so if you select our training, you can get started with a couple of different basics. We went way more in depth today than is even on this page, but we've got our fundamentals. This goes a little bit more in depth of what we're going to talk about later this afternoon, where we focus on things like color, document and page structure, writing good alt text, content and typography. And then each one of those sections dives into more information. We've got some requirements in brief at the top of each of these, how to write alt text for different image examples. So this will get you through our self-paced stuff. You can also search. If you search for something like PDF, you will get our different courses that we have on making a PDF, or you can just browse all the different self-paced stuff that we've got based on what kind of content you're looking for. And then below that, back on the training center, we've got our instructor-led training calendar. So we have trainings out through February 1st in our events so that you can look through those and see what fits for you. If the timing doesn't work, if you register for a course, we will send you the recording the next day. Most of the time, we cover what is in the self-paced guides in the live course, but in the live course, people ask questions. We might go off on some different tangents and there's different information. So it's good to join us for a live course to do that. And then we've also got office hours. So we have office hours for Commonwealth. Oh, I need to update these links for public education. And so you can go here to sign up for a time slot. You can register for the meeting series if you just want to drop in and see what other folks are asking, and a link to get that free Zoom account. You'll want to make sure that you use your EDU email address for the Zoom account. Right now at the state, we are providing training and office hours to all the schools, municipalities, and state employees, but we have a limited list of email domains, so it's not just public around the world taking up the time slots for Massachusetts state schools.
Okay. Thank you very much for attending. We are, as Stephanie mentioned, the website's being redone, mobile app. The vendor actually contacted us saying they're not going to support it anymore, but they have another version. So we're moving from Ready Ed app to Ready Core. So some things are in motion. But yeah, we'll have 2 more sessions today, and the next one's at 11:20. There's a different Zoom link in the calendar invite for Digital Accessibility Fundamentals course. So we'll see you in about 28 minutes.
And I just want to thank everybody, and I also want to congratulate you too, because this is the first school that has asked us to come join you and do this. So you are ahead of the game, even though we only have a limited amount of time, right? But I really appreciate everybody coming to pay attention to this today and for caring about it in general, because it's important. So thank you all.
Oh, it's gonna be hard. Yeah.